I sat at the far end of my daughter's Thanksgiving table, the one I'd cooked for since she was old enough to hold a spoon. The candles flickered, the turkey steamed, and my name card sat beside the baby's high chair, as if I'd been demoted to background noise. When I tried to speak, she smiled without looking up and said, "Just eat, Mom." So I did. I ate in silence, swallowed the years I'd spent holding her world together, and waited for the right moment to remind her whose house she was sitting in. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Janice slid the last pie into the oven just as the sun broke over the rooftops of suburban Indianapolis. The silence in her daughter's oversized kitchen was almost holy. Not peaceful exactly, but sacred in the way survivors find quiet before the chaos. Flour dust clung to her hands, her back ached, the granite countertops were too tall, the sleek, stainless appliances felt like they judged her every move. She missed her own kitchen, the scarred oak cabinets, the sticky spot on the floor by the fridge, the creaky drawer that held 20 years of measuring spoons. But she'd sold all that. Or rather, lost it in the mess that followed Harold's betrayal. Now she was here. Temporarily, Tessa had said, as if the word itself were a favor. The scent of brown sugar and cinnamon filled the air. Janice wiped her hands and reached for the potatoes, piling them beside the sink. No one else was awake yet. Not even the baby. At 9:47 a.m., Tessa entered the kitchen in silk pajamas and full makeup, scrolling her phone like it owed her money. "That pie better not be pecan," she said, without looking up. "It is," Janice said gently. "Your dad liked it. Thought I'd—" "We're not doing dad food," Tessa snapped. "I already told you, sweet potato and pumpkin. That's what Brian's mom brings every year." She walked to the fridge, yanked it open, and stared inside like something might suddenly appear. "Also, where's the gluten-free crust I asked for?" Janice hesitated. "I didn't see it at the store, hun. I made one regular and one with almond flour. That should be—" "It's not," Tessa muttered. "Whatever." She let the fridge slam shut, then padded out of the kitchen muttering, "Guess I'll just fast today." Janice pressed her thumb hard into a Yukon Gold, splitting the skin. The oven clicked softly behind her. Brian wandered in a few minutes later, barefoot, carrying a mug that read, "World's Okayest Dad." He peered at the pies, gave a theatrical sniff. "You're going traditional, huh?" he said. "Bold move." She forced a smile. "Some things are worth holding on to. Just as long as it's not stuffing with giblets. I swear, last year my mom said it tasted like liver, pate, and trauma." Janice gave a weak laugh. Brian wandered back out without offering help. At 10:30, Devin appeared, freshly showered, wearing jeans and a Henley. He gave Janice a warm, tired smile, like he knew this house was a tightrope, and he was trying not to make it shake. "Need a hand?" he asked, already walking toward the pile of potatoes. She nodded. "You read my mind." They worked in rhythm. Peel, rinse, slice. Janice asked about his new job. He asked about her old one. His tone wasn't pitying, just curious, respectful. Like he didn't assume she was broken just because she was staying in someone else's guest room. Then came the voices, faint but sharp, drifting from the hallway where Tessa paced on a call. "I don't care if she's my mother," Tessa said, loud and brittle. "She should be grateful I let her stay here. Do you know how many people I turned down for Thanksgiving just to keep her from feeling judged?" A silence followed. Janice felt the words land, not like stones, but like wet cement poured over her chest. Slow, heavy, unavoidable. She said nothing. Devin glanced over but didn't comment. The two of them worked in silence for a long time. When it came time to set the table, Janice laid out Tessa's wedding china. Ivory porcelain with silver trim, the set they'd picked out together at Macy's 12 years ago, when Tessa had insisted she wanted something timeless. Each plate rested perfectly spaced on the dark walnut table. Napkins folded into tight triangles. Wine glasses polished to shine. She had always been good at this part. The hosting, the creating of an illusion. She lit 2 candles at the center and stood back. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass cabinet across the room. She looked smaller than she remembered. Behind her, someone cleared their throat. Janice turned slowly. It was Devin, holding an unopened envelope in his hand. "You might want to see this," he said, eyes serious. The envelope sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Devin hadn't pushed it, and Janice hadn't asked. Some things waited their turn. By 5 o'clock, the dining room glowed under warm pendant lights and the soft flicker of taper candles. The air carried hints of roasted rosemary, browned butter, and something sweeter. Maybe nostalgia, or maybe regret. Janice had done everything Tessa hadn't noticed. Fresh eucalyptus twisted into the centerpiece, perfectly browned rolls under a linen towel, even hand-lettered place cards she'd found in the back of a drawer. She hadn't been asked to. She just knew how to make things beautiful. Yet when they sat down, her name was at the far end of the table, near the high chair and a stack of damp wipes. The head seat, the one she'd taken for 20 Thanksgivings before Harold's affair detonated their lives, was now Tessa's, and she filled it like a throne. "I told the Pilates studio they're using the wrong type of lavender oil. It's nauseating," Tessa was saying, "like if someone dipped a Q-tip in Grandma's perfume and waved it near your face. I told them, you want loyalty? Fix your atmosphere." Brian laughed too loud, too long. "That's why you should just work from home, babe. Tell them to pay you not to come in." "Honestly, if I left, the whole place would fall apart," Tessa said, sipping white wine like it cost more than it did. "I'm the only one there who knows what a brand is." Janice tried to keep her focus on the turkey. Perfectly moist, she'd made sure of it. But the noise at the table made every bite feel dry. Devin sat beside her, listening more than he spoke. Across the table, Brian speared a mound of sweet potatoes and cleared his throat like a man winding up for applause. "So, I've been thinking," he began, resting his elbows on the table like it was a stage, "about launching something. Real estate adjacent, but with AI integration. I've already got a guy coding it in Java or Python or whatever. Thing is, all we need now is seed money to scale it." Janice froze. She didn't lift her eyes. "Didn't you?" Devin started, then caught himself. Brian plowed ahead. "We've got the branding locked in. Urban Nest. Real chic. I mean, it's early, but I pitched it at the golf club and guys were in. I'm talking like, where do I wire the funds type energy." Janice chewed slowly. Last winter, she'd written Brian a check, 5 figures, to get something off the ground. He'd said it was temporary, just until their credit line came through. Then the topic vanished. So did the money. "I thought you said that idea fizzled," she said quietly, not looking up. Brian chuckled. "Nah, that was the original model. This is different. That was before we had traction." Tessa jumped in. "Brian's vision is finally clicking. The universe rewards people who take risks." Janice opened her mouth, wanting to say something, anything, about the meal, the hours spent prepping, the way the pies turned out just right despite the almond flour. But the moment she leaned forward, fork laid gently across her plate, Tessa cut her off with a smile that had no warmth behind it. "Just eat, Mom, okay?" she said sweetly. "Don't make it about you." Devin's eyes widened, mouth parting just slightly. No one else reacted. Janice stared at her plate, the food blurred, the warmth in her chest. The thing she'd carried from the scent of cinnamon that morning, from Devon's kind silence, from the care she'd tucked into every corner of this house, drained out like water from a cracked bowl. She picked up her fork again, took one careful bite, chewed, swallowed. That was enough. She set the fork down. Her appetite, like her place in this family, had vanished without a trace. Then came a sound. Not the clatter of dishes or a laugh at the other end. A buzz. Faint, vibrating against the kitchen counter. A phone. Devon looked down. The envelope she'd ignored all afternoon was gone from the counter. In its place, his phone, screen lit up. He slid it toward her, face unreadable. A name she hadn't seen in months glowed across the screen. Harold Poirce's new voicemail. The dining room had thinned to wine-stained napkins and cold remnants. No one offered to clear a plate. No one mentioned the meal. Tessa and Brian had migrated to the living room, sunk deep into the sectional, half watching a Netflix true crime doc with the volume too loud. Janice stood at the sink, her sleeves rolled to the elbows, hands submerged in cloudy water that had long gone lukewarm. She moved slowly, not out of exhaustion, but restraint. Each glass rinsed with quiet precision, each dish stacked with care, as if control could be reclaimed one utensil at a time. Behind her, Devon lingered with a dish towel, waiting for a break in her rhythm. "I can dry," he said gently, reaching for a plate. She shook her head. "I've got it." "You sure?" Janice gave a half smile without turning. "Let me finish something today." He hesitated, then backed off, retreating toward the hallway with a reluctant nod. From the living room, Tessa's voice cut through the walls like she wanted to be overheard. "She's always been better in the kitchen anyway." A pause. Then Brian chimed in. "Gotta earn your keep somehow." Their laughter came muffled. Not cruel exactly, but familiar. Casual. The sound of two people secure in their own comfort. Unaware or uninterested in how it landed. Janice didn't flinch. She didn't fumble the plate in her hands or snap the faucet off in a show of emotion. Instead, she rinsed, set it aside, reached for another. Her body moved like a machine she'd long ago programmed for survival. Outside the window, dusk crept in. The neighbor's porch light blinked on. A dog barked 2 houses down. Janice stared past it all, her fingers idle on the edge of the sink. The reflection in the glass showed only her, small, backlit, fading into her daughter's spotless kitchen. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She dried her hands slowly on a dish towel, then picked it up. Angela. Still doing their dishes? Janice exhaled through her nose. Not a laugh. Not quite a sigh. Just a leak of pressure before the boil. Another text followed seconds later. Angela. I've got wine, a porch heater, and nobody here's gonna make you earn it. The corner of Janice's mouth twitched. A flicker of warmth, quickly extinguished. From the other room, Tessa yelled, "Did you put the pie away or is it still out?" "No, please. No, thank you. Just the usual summons." Janice didn't answer. She opened the dishwasher, loaded the final plate, and closed it with quiet finality. She wiped down the counter, folded the towel, and placed it with gentle precision next to the sink. The unopened voicemail from Harold still sat on, her own phone, ignored. But now, with her hands free, she reached for it, pressed play. His voice came through, tentative, cautious. "Hi, Janice. I know this probably isn't welcome, but I wanted to say I'm sorry for how things ended, for not protecting what we had. I thought about calling sooner, but I figured I didn't deserve to. Anyway, I hope today wasn't too hard. You always made Thanksgiving feel like home. I guess I just wanted you to know that I never found that again. Take care of yourself." Silence followed, the kind that hummed in her ears. She set the phone down, face first on the counter. Janice glanced at the window again. Her reflection stared back, steadier now, still quiet, but solid. In the background, Brian called out something unintelligible about whipped cream. Devon was upstairs with the baby, the only one she hadn't disappointed yet. Tessa's laughter rose again, as carefree as a teenager's. Janice's gaze shifted to the hall, not toward the living room, toward the front door. Janice didn't put on shoes. She didn't need them. The hardwood floor cooled under her feet as she stepped out of the kitchen, walked past the hallway gallery of smiling family portraits, all curated by Tessa, and down the corridor to the room at the very end. It had once been a guest room. Pale blue walls, a queen-sized bed, and a lopsided bookshelf she'd assembled herself the summer after Harold left. When Tessa got married, she'd asked to borrow it for a little while, until the upstairs was remodeled. That remodel had never happened. Janice closed the door softly behind her. The laughter from the TV carried through the drywall, distant but sharp. She stood for a long moment in the center of the room, eyes fixed on the old dresser beneath the window. Inside the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of flannel pajamas and 3 old photo albums wrapped in tissue, sat the lockbox. Cold steel, combination dial. No one else in the house knew the code. She hadn't turned it in over a year, but her fingers remembered. The lock clicked open. She lifted the lid and removed a thick manila folder, time-stamped and tabbed with court documents, bills of sale, and the final piece, a property deed, folded and sealed in a clear plastic sleeve. Her name, and only her name, sat printed across the top. Janice Irene Whitaker, owner of record, paid in full. Janice ran her fingers across the lettering, then sat on the edge of the bed, the paper resting in her lap like a long-forgotten map. This house had been hers before it was theirs. Bought with her name, her credit, her inheritance from her father. Tessa and Brian had moved in, just for a year, back when they were juggling 2 toddlers and a mountain of student loans. Janice had agreed without hesitation. That was who she was. That was who she'd been. She reached for her phone. Her thumb hovered over Angela's name for only a second before tapping it. Janice. I want to move forward. The reply came less than a minute later. Angela. Tomorrow morning. My office. 9 sharp. No exclamation point. No questions. Just a woman who had been waiting for Janice to catch up to herself. Outside her bedroom window, the street was quiet. Porch lights glowed amber down the block. Someone across the street wheeled their trash bin to the curb. Normal things. American things. Steady things. Janice folded the deed again with careful hands. Not reverent. Deliberate. She slid it back into the sleeve, then into the folder, then locked the box shut and returned it to its place in the drawer. The flannel pajamas went back on top. She stood, walked to the lamp, switched it off. The room fell into stillness. From the other side of the wall, Tessa's voice cut through again, shrill, mid-laugh, followed by the low hum of Brian's reply and the unmistakable sound of a commercial break cranked too loud. Some reality show. Something loud and forgettable. Janice sat on the edge of the bed, hands in her lap. Her posture wasn't slumped. It was precise, as if her spine were remembering how it used to feel to take up space. She didn't check her phone again. She didn't glance toward the door. Instead, her eyes fixed on a small crack in the ceiling, a thin line that had split through the paint sometime last winter, right above where the guest bed ended and the room's original life began. A crack no one else had noticed. She followed it with her eyes, slowly, until it vanished into shadow. And then, from downstairs, a different sound rose. Not a laugh, not the TV. A knock. 3 deliberate raps at the front door. Janice didn't move. She just listened. Angela's office was tucked above a bakery that smelled like yeast and burnt sugar. The staircase creaked under Janice's steps, narrow and worn from decades of other people's problems climbing towards solutions. Frosted glass bore Angela's name in black block letters. Inside, the space was small but exact. Mahogany desk, framed degrees, a row of empty chairs along one wall. No candles, no softening touches, only facts and paperwork. Angela rose when Janice entered, clasping her hands but not in a hug. "Sit," she said, her voice steady. Janice lowered herself into the chair, her palms flat against her knees. She had left the property deed in the lockbox. She didn't need to bring it to feel its weight. Angela reached for a manila folder, sliding it across the desk. "This is the first step. Notice of eviction. Because of the familial relationship, we can file under owner's rights for immediate occupancy. Quiet, legal, effective." Janice read the page once, then again. The words blurred, but the meaning stayed sharp. She looked up. "No yelling. Just legal." Angela nodded once. "Exactly. The paperwork does the shouting for you." Outside the window, a delivery truck idled. Someone shouted in the street. Janice pressed the pen to the page and signed her name in a single motion. Her handwriting was steadier than she expected. When it was done, Angela slid the papers back into the folder, tapped it square. "I'll handle the service. They'll have 30 days. She didn't ask if Janice was sure. She knew. Janice stood, smoothing her coat. "Thank you." Angela's eyes softened. "You've been feeding everyone else for years. Time to feed yourself." Janice didn't reply. She stepped out, descended the narrow stairs, and let the cold November air bite at her cheeks. By late afternoon, she was back at the grocery store, weaving through aisles like a ghost no one noticed. She picked up things Devin liked: fresh bread, a jar of his favorite salsa, a small pack of ginger cookies. No list. Just instinct. She checked out at the self-scan lane, bagged her items, and drove home without music. The house was lit up like a department store display when she pulled into the driveway. She carried the bags inside quietly, slipping past the living room where Tessa sprawled on the sofa, phone in hand, TV blaring. In the kitchen, she unpacked groceries, set water to boil, and began chopping vegetables. Her movements were smooth, unhurried. She cooked not to please, but to ground herself. Devin appeared at the doorway, eyes catching hers. He looked like he wanted to ask something, but she gave a small shake of her head and he stayed silent. At 6:30, the table was set. Not with china this time, just everyday plates. Janice ladled soup into bowls and slid bread onto a cutting board. They sat down. Tessa scrolled her phone between spoonfuls. Brian was already on his second helping. No one commented on the food. Then, between one bite and the next, Tessa looked up and smirked. "Don't forget who's feeding you, Mom." It was said lightly, like a joke, but it landed heavy. Brian chuckled without looking up. Janice's hand paused midair. She placed her fork down, slow enough for the sound of metal on ceramic to slice through the chatter. The room went still for a second. Even the TV in the other room seemed to lower its volume. She straightened her shoulders, her hands folding together in her lap like she was back in church. When she spoke, her voice was level. Not loud, not trembling. "That's the last time you'll say that," she said quietly. Devin's eyes snapped up, mouth slightly open. Tessa blinked, confused. "What?" Janice's gaze didn't waver. "Finish your soup," she said. "You'll need your strength." Tessa's spoon clattered against the rim of her bowl. She pushed back from the table so hard her chair scraped across the hardwood like a warning. "What the hell are you talking about?" she snapped, palms flat against the table like she was bracing for an earthquake, or trying to start one. Janice didn't flinch. Her hands remained folded neatly in her lap. "Angela will explain everything tomorrow," she said. The calmness wasn't false. It was earned. Cold forged in silence, patience, years of meals made, an insult swallowed. Tessa didn't recognize it. She didn't recognize this version of her mother at all. Brian scoffed, barely looking up. "This is some manipulative boomer garbage," he muttered, mouth full. "Seriously, what? Now you're what? Threatening us? Because you made soup?" Devon stared down at his bowl. His appetite had left without warning. He didn't speak, but the muscles in his jaw flexed as if he were holding something back. Janice caught it. She always had. "I'm not threatening anyone," she said, still seated. "I'm clarifying." Tessa's face flushed, not with confusion, with something sharper. Disbelief with a pulse. What the hell is Angela going to explain? Janice stood. She didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. She reached for her water glass, took a small sip, and looked directly at her daughter. "That I'm not your tenant," she said. "That this house is mine, and that the law recognizes that." For a moment, no one moved. Then Brian pushed his chair back and stood, pacing toward the sink with theatrical exasperation. "Oh my God," he muttered. "This is classic. This is classic. You give someone a roof and a couple of casseroles and suddenly they want a parade." "You didn't give me anything," Janice said. "Not the roof, not the kitchen, not even the pie you didn't eat." Tessa stepped around the table like she was about to approach Janice, then stopped, arms folded, jaw clenched. Her voice dropped into something lower, edged with accusation. "You've been waiting for this, planning it, sitting there like a saint while you filed papers behind our backs?" Janice glanced at Devon. "Grab your jacket." Tessa looked at him too. "You're going with her?" He didn't answer. Just stood, slow and quiet, and walked to the hallway closet. The silence that followed said more than anything. Outside, the cold snapped at their faces as they stepped onto the porch. The night was still, the neighborhood tucked into itself, porch lights glowing, curtains drawn. Janice walked slowly down the driveway, gravel crunching beneath their feet. Devon caught up beside her, hands deep in his jacket pockets. For half a block they said nothing. Then he asked, softly, "Are you kicking them out?" She didn't stop walking. Her eyes stayed forward, scanning the bare trees ahead like they held the answer. "No," she said. "I'm just taking back what's mine." Devon nodded once. "You really own it?" "I always did." They turned the corner onto a quieter street. A single porch light flickered across the way. Janice exhaled, the breath clouding in front of her. Devon cleared his throat. "You're not doing this for me, right?" She looked over, surprised. "No," she said. "I'm doing this because I should have done it a long time ago." He nodded again, slower this time, thoughtful. Behind them, in the distance, the faint sound of a door slammed shut. Janice didn't turn around. The knock wasn't loud. It wasn't hesitant either. Just 3 solid taps that echoed through the foyer like a countdown. Janice stood on the porch, hands folded, coat zipped tight against the October chill. She didn't lean forward. She didn't peer in through the glass like a trespasser might. She simply stood, level and waiting, her eyes fixed on the front door as though it were a wound she no longer bled from. Angela stood 1 step below, envelope in hand. Her expression was as tight and professional as the gray wool blazer she wore. Her lips pressed into a line so thin it looked carved. She didn't glance back at Janice. She didn't need to. Inside, muffled voices moved. Furniture creaked, footsteps crossed wood. Then the door yanked open. Tessa appeared in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, mascara smudged beneath her eyes like war paint. She looked down at Angela with a half laugh, half snarl. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," she said. Angela didn't flinch. She simply extended the envelope. "You're being served," she said. "You'll find the notice inside. You have 30 days. Tessa stared at the envelope like it was on fire. Are you actually serious with this? She barked. She sends you… what? Her own little personal lawyer pet now? Angela didn't move. You're being served, she repeated, by a court-recognized claim. Your name is on the lease. You're not the owner of record. She is. Tessa didn't take it. She slapped the envelope out of Angela's hand. It hit the porch with a soft thwack, barely louder than the wind. You don't get to do this, Tessa screamed. You think just because she's been sleeping in the guest room and stirring soup like some repressed Stepford widow, she owns the place now? Janice didn't blink. She stood one pace behind, arms at her sides, as Tessa's voice spiked through the neighborhood. From inside, Brian's voice burst out, pitched high with fury. We have rights, you know. You think this little dog and pony act is gonna hold up? I'll tie this up in court so long your dentures'll rot out, Janice. He was visible now through the kitchen window, his body a moving shadow behind the curtain, pacing in loops. See what I mean? Tessa shouted, gesturing behind her like she'd won a point. You don't just get to take something because you think you earned it. This house, this life, we built this. You were just some leftover we didn't send to storage. Angela calmly reached down, picked up the envelope, and held it out again. You can sign to acknowledge receipt or not, but it's official, she said. Tessa yanked the envelope from her hand with a guttural noise, tore it halfway down the seam, then flung it onto the welcome mat. The paper scattered like broken feathers. Inside, a staircase creaked. Devon was on the landing, his back to the wall, one hand gripping the banister like it might steady the ground beneath him. He didn't say anything. He didn't move. His eyes were fixed straight ahead. Not at his sister, not at his father, but past them, through the open door, to the woman standing outside in a wool coat that didn't hide her conviction. Janice caught his gaze. He didn't look away. Angela turned toward her, voice low and professional. They might try to stall, file a complaint, claim undue hardship. Janice nodded once, eyes still on Devon. Don't let them bluff. Angela gave the smallest of smiles, not warm, just understood. Then she turned and walked briskly to her car, her heels clicking like punctuation across the sidewalk. The door slammed with a violent thud. A second later, a shout from Brian rattled the front window. Janice didn't move. She stepped off the porch, slow and deliberate, and followed Angela's path down the walkway. The wind picked up as she reached the mailbox, scattering a few brittle leaves across the concrete. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then fell, silent. Angela was already behind the wheel when Janice reached the curb. As the door unlocked with a soft click, Angela spoke without looking up from the steering wheel. We'll file today. Clerk's office closes at 4. Janice settled into the passenger seat, adjusting the hem of her coat. Good, she said quietly. They thought I wouldn't do it. Thought I'd fold like I always did. Angela shifted into drive. They'll think a lot of things, until they don't. The car pulled away, tires humming low against the road. Back on the porch, the envelope remained, torn, dirt smudged and flapping faintly in the wind. The first call came before dawn. Janice sat at the kitchen table, sipping black coffee and staring at the streaks of early gray bleeding through the window. Her phone buzzed once, twice, then a third time. Long enough for the silence in the house to feel like it had been holding its breath. The screen lit up. Caller-eyed. Aunt Gina, she let it ring out. By 9 a.m. the silence was gone. Her cousin Michael texted, "Heard what happened. Please call, I'm not taking sides." Then came Loretta from Nevada. Then Uncle Clay, who hadn't called in 4 Christmases. By mid-morning, the voicemails told a single smudged story. "We're just worried. Tessa said you're confused." "Sweetheart, you've been through a lot. She says a lawyer manipulated you? You know the family would have helped you if you were struggling. No need for this drama." Janice shut the phone off, set it face down on the table, and returned to her coffee. She didn't pace. She didn't mutter. She didn't cry. She reached for her folder. The manila one with every deed, every receipt, every statement from the last 11 years, notarized, dated, filed under her own name. It was a fat thing, lived in and crisp all at once. Paper proof of everything she'd carried in silence while others bickered about what they thought she owed them. At noon, her niece, Hallie, pulled into the driveway in a silver Civic that coughed when it idled. Janice watched her through the front window. Young but not naive, sharp around the eyes, and smart enough to wear neutral colors when stepping into a family fire. Janice opened the door before Hallie could knock. "Come on in," she said gently, kettles hot. Inside, they sat at the same kitchen table that had once been a battleground. Today, it felt like neutral ground. Hallie fidgeted with the strap of her purse. I wasn't sure if I should come." "I'm glad you did," Janice said. She slid the folder across the table. "Start wherever you like." Hallie opened it and flipped through. Utility bills in Janice's name, dated back years, deed transfer documents, the property tax ledger, maintenance records, even the note from the roofing company with the check stub still stapled on. "No dementia?" Hallie asked, voice dry. "No dementia," Janice confirmed. "Just patience that wore out." Hallie exhaled through her nose. "Tessa's been in the group chat telling everyone you were slipping, that Angela bullied you into this." "Angela was 9 when I refinanced this house," Janice said. Hallie smirked, then looked up. And it was all there. Belief, anger, and that particular heartbreak reserved for families who weaponize each other. "I'll talk to them," she said. "I know you will." They didn't hug, but they didn't need to. Hallie gathered her coat, tucked the folder back into Janice's hands, and paused at the door. "For what it's worth," she said, "I'm proud of you." Janice gave a small, weary smile. "Took me long enough." Later that night, as the house fell back into quiet, Janice padded down the hallway with a laundry basket tucked under one arm. The light in her bedroom was on, though she hadn't left it that way. She stepped in cautiously. No one there. Just the scent of clean air and something faintly citrus. Her eyes dropped to the nightstand. A folded scrap of lined paper sat beneath her reading glasses. She opened it slowly. "I know the truth. Devon." It was small. No signature, no questions. Just a fact, laid bare. She stared at the note a long while. Then she turned, walked to the kitchen, and opened the bread box. Not for bread, but for the envelope she kept for him. Inside, a 10, 2 5s, and enough singles to keep the balance casual. Tucked inside a plain Ziploc bag like always. She slid it into the side pocket of his backpack before heading to bed. Morning would come like it always did. But something had shifted now. Something quiet and permanent. Janice turned off the light. The courthouse smelled like old varnish and nerves. Janice sat in the hallway outside room 204, folder in her lap, heels flat on the tile. She wore a plain navy sweater and slacks, no jewelry, no makeup, just clean lines and quiet presence. Angela paced nearby, tablet in hand, hair in a low bun so sharp it looked ironed into place. She hadn't spoken much since the ride over, and she didn't need to. The preparation was done. The paperwork was solid. Now it was just about time. Janice glanced at the wall clock. 9:56. At 9:58, the double doors pushed open and chaos entered on cracked leather boots and indignation. Tessa stumbled in first, sunglasses on despite the indoor lighting, chewing furiously on a piece of gum. Her coat was unbuttoned, her blouse wrinkled like it had slept on the floor. She scanned the hallway, spotted Janice, and let out a single scoffing breath. Brian was behind her, talking too loud to someone who clearly didn't want to be there. A slim, exhausted-looking public defender with a plastic file folder and a look in his eye that said, "I'm doing this because the court made me." Janice watched as they moved to the other bench. Angela didn't look up. Look who brought her own paralegal from Pinterest, Brian muttered. His voice echoed down the hallway, desperate for attention. Angela didn't flinch. I'm not her paralegal, she said, still scrolling. I'm her attorney. Tessa huffed. You're barely out of undergrad. Angela smiled without warmth. That'll make it even worse when you lose. Before anyone could respond, the bailiff cracked the door open. Case 1178, Nolan ver Kessler. Inside, please. Inside the courtroom, it was colder, both in temperature and tone. The ceiling lights buzzed faintly overhead as Judge Porter shuffled through a stack of preliminary motions. He looked like he hadn't changed his glasses since the Clinton administration, and he moved with the unhurried cadence of someone who had heard it all before and probably twice that morning. Janice sat quietly at the petitioner's table, hands folded over her folder. Angela laid out the documents beside her like instruments on a sterile tray. Across the aisle, Brian sprawled into his seat like he was about to give a TED Talk. Tessa crossed her arms tightly, tugging her sleeves over her fists, chewing now so loudly that the bailiff cleared his throat once. Let's begin, Judge Porter said. Angela stood. Your Honor, we're here today to affirm rightful ownership and residence based on recorded deed, tax payment history, and utility accounts held exclusively in my client's name for over a decade. She handed over the file. The judge began flipping. Counsel for the respondents? He asked without looking up. The public defender sighed before rising. Your Honor, we intend to challenge the legitimacy of the claimed eviction on the basis of... Brian stood abruptly. We have emotional tenancy. The lawyer closed his eyes like he was counting backward from 10. We've been there for years, Brian continued, arms spread. We built that home into what it is. We painted walls. We repaired the sink when it broke. We made Christmas happen. We lived that house into meaning. And she just decides she wants it back? Tessa sniffed, dramatically. She wasn't well, Judge. She got confused. Someone pressured her. I think it was this one, she said, motioning at Angela like she was accusing her of poisoning the well. Angela stayed seated, elbows on the table, chin resting on one hand. Deeds in her name, she said. So are the bills. And the mortgage. The only thing they've built is resentment. Tessa opened her mouth again, voice tremoring. We were family. Judge Porter raised a hand. Ms. Kessler, that's enough. The room quieted instantly. He adjusted his glasses, then began reading. 1 page, 2. The silence stretched, elastic and tense, as he thumbed through bank statements and tax returns. Not a single breath from the other side of the room. At the 3rd page, he leaned back in his chair. His eyes moved from the documents to Janice, then to Angela, then to Tessa and Brian. And then, he closed the folder. Before I issue my ruling, he said, his voice low and careful, I need to ask one question. He turned to Janice. Did you ever put these two on the deed? Janice lifted her eyes. Her voice didn't shake. No, Your Honor. I never did. The judgment came down the next morning. 30 days. The number hung in the air like a clock wired to dynamite. No appeals, no loopholes, just a court-sealed timeline ticking down over every meal, every slammed door, every held breath. Janice posted a typed notice on the fridge. It was only a paragraph long, printed in bold, with the court seal attached and the date in the top corner. Beneath it, in her own handwriting, a single line. Any further damage or aggression will be reported to law enforcement. She signed it. Quietly. Neatly. By noon, the house had split into factions. Brian skulked in and out of rooms like a teenager who'd just been grounded by a stranger. His favorite new phrase was financial abuse. He set it into phone calls, muttered it in passing, even tried it on Devon once, who had barely looked up from his cereal. I was a contributor, you know, Brian snapped, gesturing at the dented drywall near the staircase. This is years of sweat equity being flushed down the drain. But sure, let's make me the villain. No one replied. That afternoon, Tessa staged her own rebellion. She cleared out the fridge, leaving only condiments and expired almond milk, then slammed the door hard enough that the magnets fell off. She didn't speak to Janice, not a hello, not a glare, just drifted through the house like a silent protest in sweatpants. By dinner time, the oven was cold, the sink still full from the night before. Janice didn't say a word. She picked up her keys, drove down to Rinaldi's for 2 hot sandwiches, and came back through the garage door like she had someplace better to be. She knocked twice on Devon's door, then stepped back. He opened it just far enough to see the paper bag, nodded once, and took it. Back in her room, Janice ate in peace. No shouting, no chewing rage, just the soft hum of the heater and the rustle of wrappers. She thought about how silence in the right hands wasn't emptiness. It was strategy. Around 9:30, the fuse finally reached something flammable. A voice cracked the calm like lightning. "You're the reason this happened," Tessa screamed from the hallway. "I'm the one who fought for us, and you stood there like a neutered scarecrow." Brian shouted something back, lower and slurred. Then, a sudden crash. Janice flinched but didn't stand. She waited. 10 seconds later, a sobbing shout. Then the sound of feet stomping toward a bedroom. A door kicked once, twice, and then silence. The next morning, she found the hole. It was the size of a soccer ball, just left of the hallway thermostat. Jagged edges, plaster scattered like white confetti on the carpet. She didn't knock. She didn't ask. She took out her phone, stepped back for a clean angle, and snapped 3 pictures. Angela responded to the text in under 5 minutes. "Document everything. File a damages report. We'll add it to the final claim." Janice exhaled through her nose, quietly. She'd stopped shaking 3 days ago. By dusk, she had a full file. Time-stamped photos, notes, even a short video she'd taken during Brian's latest "I'm the real victim here" tirade, which included him slapping the cabinet shut so hard the drawer below it popped open. Everything was going into the folder. This time, it was thicker than ever. This time, it wasn't just records. It was proof. Of who they were when no one was looking. Of what happened when power shifted. Of what came out when you refused to be stepped on. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Boxes appeared first. Quietly. Like apologies. A taped-up U-Haul box near the front door. 2 suitcases by the stairs. A row of black trash bags slumped beside the hallway bench like body bags of a life they couldn't keep. Janice said nothing. She passed them like furniture. 1 week left. That morning, she'd received another message from Angela. "Stay calm. Don't engage. They might try to stall or provoke. Just document." At 11:42 a.m., Tessa stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed tight against her ribcage, as if bracing against something stronger than the draft. "You don't really want to do this," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, it wasn't desperate. It was slippery. Like it thought it could still find a crack in Janice's resolve and crawl through. Janice folded a dish towel with precision, then set it on the counter. "You already did it for me." Tessa blinked once. Hard, like she'd been slapped in a way she hadn't prepared for. By afternoon, Brian had migrated into the driveway, dragging trash bags by the neck like they owed him something. He muttered the whole time, loud enough for Janice to hear through the screen door. "Unbelievable," he grumbled. "Give a woman a microwave and a utility bill, and suddenly she thinks she built the place from scratch." Janice didn't step outside. She didn't offer water. She just watched through the curtain, one eye on her phone. The camera app stayed open. Devon hovered quietly for most of the day. No bags, no shouting. Just a subtle shadow moving from room to room, checking drawers, folding hoodies into his backpack with the kind of care that made Janice's chest ache more than she expected. At 5:17 p.m., he knocked on her bedroom door. She opened it and found him standing there with slumped shoulders and red rims around his eyes. He didn't say anything at first, just walked in and wrapped his arms around her like a boy 10 years younger. She hugged him back, tighter than she thought she would. "Thank you for standing up," he said into her shoulder. Janice's throat tightened. "You saw what I did, didn't you?" He nodded. "I did." When he pulled away, she slipped the last of the cash she had for him into his pocket without a word. "You've got your key?" she asked. "Yeah. Keep it." Outside, the truck had arrived. A low-budget rental, tailgate rusted, ramp dented. Brian kicked it once when the latch jammed, cursing loud enough for the neighbors to look out their windows. Janice didn't flinch. Tessa stomped through the house in mismatched boots and an inside-out hoodie, grabbing the last of her things with all the dignity of a tantrum. When she passed Janice, she paused for just a breath. "You think this makes you strong?" she spat. "No," Janice said softly. "It makes me free." The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the wall clock. Then it was just quiet. Not the uneasy silence of waiting, but the kind that settled deep in the drywall and stayed. Janice stood in the living room, alone for the first time in years, surrounded by the absence of people who had made themselves loud, then small, then gone. She took her time. She walked the hallways slowly, ran her hand along the freshly patched wall where the thermostat still hummed, peeked into the empty bedrooms. The air smelled like pine sol and last chances. Back in the kitchen, the sunlight had moved across the counter, laying itself in long gold streaks across the ceramic tile. Janice poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the sink, exhaling with a soft, soundless laugh. It wasn't joy exactly. It was release. She turned to go flip the porch light on. She flipped the porch light on with one hand, glass still in the other. The switch clicked. The bulb hummed to life, and the familiar yellow glow spilled out onto the front step like nothing had ever changed. But everything had. That night, Janice didn't sleep. Not because she was anxious, because she wasn't. For the first time in what felt like years, there was no listening for footsteps, no bracing for a slammed cabinet or a muttered insult through thin walls. Just stillness. Real stillness. She made coffee at 3 a.m. and sat cross-legged in the center of her reclaimed living room, barefoot, the folder finally back in her lap. Someone had clearly rifled through it, pages bent at odd angles, a few notes out of order, but nothing was gone. She checked. Twice. They'd been looking for a weapon. All they'd found was the truth. By sunrise, Janice was at the hardware store. She changed the locks herself. Front, side, garage. No handyman, no fuss. Just the sharp click of new brass finding its groove. She tossed the old keys into the bottom of the trash with yesterday's coffee grounds, then shut the lid and wheeled it out to the curb like she was taking out the last of the ghosts. Next, the bedroom. It was technically hers, but hadn't felt like it in over 5 years. Tessa had painted the walls cashmere taupe, which really meant a sickly beige that looked like resentment dried in sunlight. The curtains were dust gray. The carpet was dingy. It didn't matter. Not anymore. Janice pulled every drawer from the dresser, vacuumed under the bed, and took down the full-length mirror Tessa had insisted on mounting too high. She washed the sheets, replaced the pillowcases, dusted the window ledges, and wiped the baseboards by hand. At noon, Angela knocked on the door. She held a simple white gift bag with black tissue paper poking out the top. No ribbon, no card. "I figured," Angela said, handing it over. "You could use something that's only yours." Inside was a small wooden plaque, maybe 8 inches across. Carved in thick serif letters, it read, "My house, my rules." Janice ran her thumb over the engraving, slow and deliberate. "I love it," she said. Angela helped her hang it above the door, centered and level. When they stepped back, they both smiled, quietly, the kind that settled deep. Later that week, Janice made dinner. Nothing fancy. Roasted chicken, buttered corn, red potatoes with rosemary from the little pot on her windowsill. She'd set the table for 4. Hallie came first, bringing a pie from the bakery on Mitchell Street and a small vase of fresh daisies. Then Mr. and Mrs. Renner from next door, the ones who'd kept an eye out during the worst of it but never pushed. They brought a bottle of sparkling cider and a hesitant kind of kindness that warmed as the evening went on. They talked about ordinary things, the weather, road construction on Willow Ave, Mrs. Renner's upcoming hip surgery. Hallie mentioned her promotion at the clinic, and Janice listened with the same quiet pride she used to reserve for recitals and report cards. It wasn't a party. It was a reclamation. The hum of voices, the clink of silverware, the way people leaned in when they spoke and actually listened. As the dishes soaked in the sink and the sun dipped behind the neighbor's chimney, Hallie stood in the kitchen doorway and said, "You know what's different? This house used to feel like it was choking. Tonight, it doesn't." Janice nodded. "That's how I know it's mine again." The next morning, she found an envelope slipped through the mail slot. No stamp, just her name in crooked block letters across the front. Inside, a folded thank you card, a real one, the kind you buy from the store. On the inside, in Devon's handwriting, still messy, still uneven, was a single sentence. "You made me believe grown-ups could be brave." She held the card to her chest and closed her eyes. She didn't cry, but she did sit down on the stairs for a long time, card still in hand, as the morning light stretched across the hardwood like a quiet promise. That evening, her phone buzzed. A text from Hallie. "Check Facebook. Not urgent, just gross." Janice opened the app, scrolled once, then stopped. There it was. Brian's face, half-lit, badly cropped, clearly taken in a moving car, plastered at the top of a post titled, "Bay, Victims of Elder Cruelty, Help Us Rebuild." He'd started a fundraiser, claimed emotional abuse, claimed the legal system had been weaponized against loving adult children. Said he and his daughter had been robbed of the family home by a bitter, manipulated senior. Donations, 79. Comments, turned off. Janice stared at the screen, lips parted just slightly. She zoomed in on the photo and saw it, the background. Behind Brian's shoulder, barely in frame, was her hallway. From inside the house, the photo confirmed what Janice already suspected. Someone had been in her house after the locks changed. She didn't text Hallie. She didn't post a comment. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she took a screenshot, saved it to a private folder on her phone, and opened a new email draft to Angela. Subject line, "Probable break-in." Body, "See attached." "Do we press charges or just add it to small claims?" Angela responded in 12 minutes. "Add it. Let's file for everything they left behind." Janice stood at her sink sipping cooled coffee while the printer spat out paperwork on bond-white legal pages. Her kitchen table became a war desk again, this time cleaner, more precise. Itemized damages, unpaid utility bills, photographic evidence, a copy of the judge's eviction order. Angela submitted the claim by close of business. 2 weeks later, they were back in courtroom 204. Judge Porter didn't blink when Angela laid out the spreadsheet of unpaid expenses. 6 months of electric bills, 3 destroyed cabinet hinges, the punctured drywall near the thermostat, and a cracked window Brian had tried to blame on weather fatigue. "Total?" the judge asked without looking up. Angela flipped the final page. $2,814, Your Honor. He nodded. Tessa sat stiffly at the defendant's table, her blouse buttoned all the way to the neck like it might protect her. Her lips were pressed so tightly together they had nearly disappeared. "Any response?" the judge asked. Her new attorney, this one younger, clearly filling in on a day she hadn't expected to be in court, adjusted his tie and mumbled something about financial hardship. Judge Porter marked his notes with 3 brisk strokes of his pen. "Judgment awarded to the petitioner," he said. "Full amount. Garnishment schedule begins immediately." Tessa didn't argue. She didn't even turn her head. Just stared straight ahead, jaw flexing, blinking so hard it looked like her eyelids were trying to escape her face. Outside, in the hallway, Angela handed Janice a copy of the ruling. "You did it," Angela said. Janice studied the embossed seal at the bottom of the page. "We did it," she replied. Angela smiled faintly. "You're finally clear." "Not quite," Janice said. "But I'm getting there." 2 days later, Tessa's name disappeared from the group chat. Hallie texted her a screenshot. She left it herself. No drama. Just gone. The next morning, Brian's fundraiser page vanished too. Not taken down, just gone. His entire Facebook profile had been deleted. No posts, no photos, no location. Like he'd packed up his victimhood and run out of internet. Janice didn't follow up. Letting people vanish had become a mercy she didn't mind granting anymore. That night, her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. The message was short. "Devin. I'm okay. Thank you again." She read it twice before responding. "Janice. You're welcome. Always." No heart emoji, no overreaching, just facts. Like, the truth she kept stacked neatly in folders now. She stood at her sink again, the house still, the air clean. Her coat was already on, purse tucked under her arm. 10 minutes later, she walked into the community food pantry on Jefferson Street with a quiet smile and a sealed envelope in her hand. The volunteer at the front desk greeted her with wide eyes. "You again? Were you looking to pick up today or—" "Drop off," Janice said, holding out the envelope. "Just a little help for the shelves." Inside, 2 crisp $100 bills, from the folder, from the wreckage. Reclaimed, repurposed, redistributed. That night, she cleaned her phone, deleted old voicemails, archived messages from numbers that would never call again. The weight of those names, Brian, Tessa, old group chats full of gaslight-laced concern, finally left her screen. She took a long bath. The good kind. Lavender salts. No clock. Just steam and quiet. She was about to settle into bed, paperback in hand, when the doorbell rang. 1 chime. Then silence. Her body went still. She slipped out of bed, robe cinched tight, and moved down the hallway barefoot. At the door, she paused, hand on the knob, listening. Then she flipped the porch light on. No one there. Just the stillness of night. But on the doormat sat a single manila envelope. Unmarked. Heavy. Janice didn't open the envelope right away. She placed it on the kitchen table, beside a still warm mug of chamomile, and stared at it like it might hiss. The weight of it felt deliberate, not just in ounces, but in intent. Eventually, she opened it. Inside was a forged copy of her will, dated 1 week prior, with a shaky signature made to look like hers. But it wasn't. The strokes were off, the curl in the J too dramatic, the E dragged. It named Brian as primary beneficiary, Tessa as alternate. She took a photo of it. Then she burned it in the sink. She watched the edges curl, blacken, and disappear, until all that remained was a faint scent of smoke, and one last lie turned to ash. Janice didn't call Angela. She didn't run to the police. She didn't need to, because the truth, the real will, was locked in a fireproof drawer upstairs, signed and sealed, witnessed, protected, and now, updated. By March, Janice had started teaching. Saturday mornings, 10 a.m. sharp, in the back kitchen of the Jefferson Street Community Pantry. A narrow space lined with donated crockpots and chipped mixing bowls, but it smelled like cinnamon, warmth, and second chances. The class had started small. 2 teen girls from the neighborhood, a single dad with a toddler in daycare, and Marcus, a retired mechanic who just wanted to learn how to make something besides eggs and toast. Now there were 12. A waitlist had started. Janice taught quietly, hands-on. She didn't lecture, she demonstrated. Showed them how to stretch 5 ingredients into a full week. How to chop onions without tears. How to make a $6 rotisserie chicken last for 3 meals and still taste like care. She brought her own cutting boards and wrote recipes on 3 left-hand 5 index cards in her neatest print. No social media, no blog, just people, food, and trust. "You teach like someone who survived something," Marcus said once during cleanup. Janice had smiled. Maybe I did? On Tuesdays, she dropped off extra soup jars at the front desk. On Thursdays, she helped stock shelves. And every Friday, without fail, Angela stopped by the pantry at noon with a coffee and a smirk. "You look younger every week," she said one day, setting the latte down on the counter. "It's starting to scare people." Janice laughed. It came out full, unguarded. "Free time and good silence," she said. "That's the real anti-aging secret." Angela leaned against the doorframe. "Any new drama?" "Only if you count someone trying to steal my name on paper." Angela didn't flinch. "Handled?" "Handled." They didn't say Tessa's name again. They didn't have to. By spring, the house felt like it had settled into itself. No footsteps to brace for. No unexplained cold drafts or missing spoons. Just the hum of the fridge, the occasional creak of old floors, and the warm pressure of ownership that finally felt like peace. Janice had repainted her bedroom soft moss green. The living room got new curtains, white linen with subtle navy stripes. She opened the windows more often now, even when the breeze bit back a little. The air inside no longer carried someone else's tension. She let it all go. Except one thing. She opened her fireproof drawer, pulled out her legal folder, and removed the will. There, beneath the official copy, she wrote a single update clause in clean, block letters. No fuss, no ceremony. Just a pen and a final decision. "In the event of my passing, the home located at 11 Hillside Lane shall transfer to Devin Noland, with no contest or condition." She signed it, dated it, initialed the margin, then picked up the envelope where she kept the deed and placed a photo inside. The thank you card from Devin, flattened and laminated. "You made me believe grown-ups could be brave. Let it be proof. Let it be reminder. Let it be enough." One night, Janice sat on her front porch with a glass of iced tea and the fading sound of a distant train trailing through the hills. The air was mild, the kind that tasted like rain without delivering it. She scrolled through the county's public records site, not out of paranoia, just curiosity. There it was. Tessa Kessler, listed as renter. Small 1-bedroom, 3rd floor, no elevator, listed in the available next year column already. A short-term lease. No mention of Brian, no mention of anything. She turned off the screen. She leaned back in her chair. And for the first time in years, she felt the weight not just of survival, but of success. She had done what no one expected. She had made peace out of scorched wood, turned paperwork into protection, turned silence into structure. And then, 1 year later, the house was quiet, but not the kind of silence that came from loss. It was the kind built with intention, layered, steeped in choice. The table was set for one, a simple linen runner stretched down the center. Nothing frilly, just clean cream cloth with stitched borders. Atop it sat a small plate of roasted chicken thighs, crisp-skinned, rosemary tucked just beneath. No turkey this year, No pretense. Just what she liked. Mashed potatoes with too much butter. Green beans with garlic and a squeeze of lemon. A personal-size pumpkin pie, set off to the side, still warm from the oven. The crust had cracked slightly at the edge, and she didn't care. Janice smoothed the napkin across her lap, lifted a glass of sparkling cider, and lit a single tapered candle. Vanilla and spice. The good one. The one she used to keep in a drawer so Tessa wouldn't waste it on regular days. Today was regular and sacred. She took a deep breath in, held it, released it slow. It was the first Thanksgiving she could remember where no one was yelling, no one sulking, no one bringing up the past like a court exhibit. Just her. A quiet house, a warm meal, and air that didn't carry the tension of someone else's disappointment. She took her first bite. The chicken was perfect. Halfway through the meal, her phone buzzed once on the counter. She almost didn't check it. She didn't need to. But something in her gut, not urgency, just softness, nudged her forward. The message was from a number saved under one name, Devon. A photo filled the screen. A pie. Pumpkin. Clearly homemade. The crust slightly uneven but golden and proud. The filling smooth. The edge crimped just enough to show effort. Not perfection. Practice. Beneath it. Happy Thanksgiving. I made this. Your recipe. Janice's chest tightened. Not painfully. Just full. She set the phone down beside her plate, blinked back something warm at the edges of her eyes, and looked at her own pie across the table. Same cracks. Same color. Same heart. Just baked in two places. She didn't reply right away. She didn't have to. Instead, she leaned back in her chair. Let the candle flicker. Let the warmth of the food and the quiet and the memory of what had come before settle around her like a blanket. And in that moment, she remembered. Every dish served with a side of tension. Every conversation cut off at the pass. Every bite eaten too quietly or too loudly, or under someone's breath. Every holiday that felt like a test. And now, this. A quiet reclamation, a table set with her own hands, a meal made for no one's expectations, and a pie, passed down not as an heirloom, but as a kindness. From a boy who once stood silent in a hallway and now sent snapshots of small victories. Janice closed her eyes. She didn't need to toast, or pray, or narrate it. She had already said the loudest thing of her life, and no one had heard it, because it hadn't been spoken. It had been written, filed, defended, signed. They wanted me silent. I answered with a signature.